Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. Now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is JJ Wilde. And I'm going to be honest with you, I assume most of the people who listen to my show probably don't know who she is, and that's okay. That is one of the things when doing the show that I kind of also really wanted to do, which is kind of showcase some people maybe you're not familiar with. I often say that I love having behind-the-scenes people on the show as well, and upon actually sitting down with JJ, found out that, she also was TMing the tour that they were on, does a lot of other things behind the scenes, not only on her tours, but I would assume in general as well. So always kind of love showcasing those people, but this was one that kind of came through my email. They were coming through on tour on the Marcus King tour, and her people reached out and said they thought it'd be a great fit. And it's always appreciative when someone thinks that I and what I do would be a good fit for someone on their roster. And upon listening to the music and checking it out, I thought it was very interesting. Marcus King, JJ, and some of these kind of crossover acts that aren't quite country, and I think of what we think of country to be, but not entirely rock and roll or rock or whatever. We're kind of starting to see these blending of genres, and it's sort of just becoming this thing where it's just music, for lack of a better term. And, I really kind of fuck with that a little bit. This thing, I think when people look at me and they just assume, oh, you're the hardcore metal guy, and obviously I've done a pretty good job over the years of throwing people curveballs, and if you think this is what I'm into, and then I'll have someone on like a JJ, or even like Rachel from He Is We, and some other people over the years of doing this, that it becomes this thing where I like challenging maybe the status of what people assume this show is going to be. And, I know when people see the show name, Brutally Speaking, they either A, just think it's about drinking, which it can be. I do obviously enjoy drinks of all different types, but also I like a good play on words. And honestly, it's really just about having a brutally honest conversation sometimes that you wouldn't have with a stranger that you've only hung out with for maybe about 5 minutes before you hit record and, have a conversation about some of these things. So to me, I feel like that in name applies to anybody. And getting to sit down with JJ and talk with her, as she's prepping for the show that she's about to play, was really interesting. And just kind of even getting to kind of, as she's prepping and getting ready, sort of discussing sort of the hassles and bumps in the road of that day on tour. It's kind of touring just as a whole. I was reminded as I was hanging out with Andrew from Idola, Dance Gavin Dance, this past weekend, at the show here, wrapping up their tour, him talking about how the tour has been doing, hearing about, some issues with some venues and just some of the behind the scenes kind of things. And to me, the touring world is just so fascinating in that it's this thing that sort of is the wild, wild west, but like everyone kind of has navigated it in completely different ways. Sometimes there's a universal way to do something. Sometimes it is just, this is how we figured it out. And there's something so interesting about that to me. The people that choose to live this lifestyle that is so beyond what I think a lot of people can comprehend. So to talk to someone like JJ, who's kind of starting to break through and kind of make a name for herself as an artist. I mean, this is funny to use this as a barometer, because I think it kind of also showcases how potentially shallow sometimes I feel like we as Americans are with our scope of what's happening outside of our own country. But, JJ has already been nominated and won a Juno, which is essentially the Canadian Grammys. So, I mean, it's no small feat. What she's doing, clearly, a lot of people are catching on to. She's getting on really great tours and just doing a lot of good stuff. And like I said, it's very interesting. It's not any necessarily one style, one genre. And to me, I think that's more interesting when someone understands that they want to showcase all of who they are, that they aren't just one-dimensional. And that was what intrigued me when I started listening to the music when I was pitched having her on the show. And so I was really excited to talk to her and kind of pick her brain a little bit about some of her songwriting processes and some of the other things kind of going on with her music. So in that capacity, I was very excited to chat with her. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with JJ, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it.
Okay, haven't done one of these in a hot minute where I'm actually in a green room before a show chatting with someone. It's kind of almost a luxury now that we don't get to afford after the pandemic. It feels like everyone kind of is still very, I don't want to say hesitant, but it still seems like people are just like, this is my space, and we do this via Zoom or online. So thank you for doing this in person. Something I'm listening to the EP, which is about 2.5 weeks old now.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm on tour and I don't have a concept of time.
It's Groundhog Day for you.
Yeah.
I get it. But I was thinking, I get really fascinated with the idea of concepts and titles and words. So obviously, The Best of Me Part 1 is a very intriguing title to me because without knowing your age, and I'm not asking for your age, but I think it's an interesting concept to be like, wherever you're at, you think, this is the best of me Part 1. So there's always more room for another best of. But how did you land on that title?
Well, so one of the tracks on the EP is Best of Me, which wasn't the whole idea behind the name. I think, with writing this record, there was a lot of personal growth that happened, and a lot of what these songs are about are making mistakes and learning from them. There's a lot to be said about, the songs that I said I would never write, in the sense of like breakup songs, or, there's all these different things that it's not necessarily that this piece of work is the best of me. I think that I found the best of myself through this process, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily like I'm like, here you go, have it all. This is all I got. This is the best of me. It's more that is kind of the road that led me to that title. Is like, that's where I'm at now. It's not really a reflection of the songs themselves, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I guess I should have prefaced not saying maybe that it's the best of you. But
right.
I always feel like this is such a crutch now that I lean on. But it's like, having gone through therapy, sometimes I approach things from a different way, where I'm like sit back and think about it for a minute versus just like surface level things. So like, to me, I constantly think about, like, when I hear the best of me, it's like, this is the best of me that I can give right now. This is the best of me where I'm at currently. And understanding what that means to you, maybe what it entails to pull those things out. And I think it's honestly more of a just generally being upfront and honest with yourself and being comfortable with who you are that allows you to be that best version of yourself.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of growth that happens when you dig deep, and like you said, going to therapy, or like I view a lot of my writing sessions as a therapy session, because I talk about things that I wouldn't normally share with people.
Right.
You're getting into the deepest, darkest pits of your insecurities and fears and joys as well, but you're touching all those points, and you're sharing it. If it's a co-write, you're sharing it with somebody sometimes you've never met, or sometimes one of your friends or whatever. But either way, you get to a place that, at least for myself, I don't always give to people. And so even just going to that place and vocalizing it, I feel like that in itself helps your brain process these things, and you get to talk about it in a different way where it's not directly associated with you, even though it is, but you're kind of more talking about it in the room, and then you feel a little less maybe scared to like add in your 2 cents because it's not necessarily like, well, you know, directed completely at you. So I feel like there was a lot that came out in this EP that, yeah, again, it brought me to a place where I felt like hopefully the best version of myself for now, and then that'll get better with part 2. No.
Was the mindset to always have a part 2, or was that just a part of the process of figuring out what this collection of songs is going to be?
There was always a plan.
Okay.
It's very intentional.
Okay. Because sometimes like, and I think it speaks to now the landscape of the music industry where it sits, where, you know, you see some people who are so dead set on doing things the way they've always been done. We're putting out an album, a full album. We're, you know, doing a 2-year album touring cycle, kind of exhausting everything. And then either if you're working on songs while you're on the road, or, hey, here's 3 months, we need a product literally by the end of this 3-month period.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets to this point now where, as an artist, it's like, is it more advantageous and satisfying to be more in the moment and do something in small chunks? Because I feel like, and maybe you can speak to this knowing that there's an intention behind it, but I feel like it allows there to be a little bit more growth organically where you're at in the moment, versus maybe it feeling like such a drastic change sonically or stylistically, because you've been working on this in that time, but in 2 years, like, people are like, wait, where the fuck did this sound come from? Where did this song come from? And you're like, well, I did that a year and a half ago. You're just now catching up to me.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to this other thing I've talked about ad nauseum on the show, but the duality of an artist where you don't exist in any plane. You like, yes, you're existing now, and whatever you're going through now creates the inspiration for the new stuff. And then you got to go backtrack when you're creating the thing for the record. And then when you're done with that, you have to backtrack even more when you're performing these songs and talking about an album that just came out and doing the promo cycle. So you sort of exist in these like 3 different existences at once.
Yeah.
So I always think that's kind of an interesting way to approach a life.
It is. And it is a good point on like, there's definitely a shift in how a lot of artists are releasing their music. And I think that there's great things about both, you know, kind of sprinkling things and teasing small bits of music. And that is beneficial because it gives the artist a laneway to kind of see what's connecting and, you know, find their audience in that way. There's a whole different growth strategy there. But I also think that there is something about creating something that you believe in and putting it out to the world and saying, this is it, whether I have these few songs that are connecting or not, like just doing it because you believe in it. I feel like there's 2 very good, you know, reasons for both.
Right.
But I think also with, you know, kind of teasing small chunks, it is fun to experience them and know that you have a little bit saved up, and you know, you're listening to the songs almost more so in real time than you would if you were just to like wait, put the album out. You know what I mean? Like it gives you a bit less time to sit on it, which is nice because I mean, at least for me, I feel a lot more connected to the songs right after I write them, right? As most artists do. But there's also certain songs that, you know, just stick with you forever.
Do you feel that doing it sort of more in the moment allows you to not maybe overthink and get in your own way?
I think there's always overthinking. I will never get over that. I've tried. I've gotten better at it, but there's definitely, it's always, you know, demo's done, everything's on, mixing, and then you're just listening to it over and over and over, and you're like, but what if that snare was just a half, you know, what? And you're like, wait a second, no one's gonna know that, no one's gonna notice. But then, of course, you're like, but they might. And it might make or break the song, that one snare sound.
It is wild to see how many, decisions that seem very mundane and don't seem like they're going to impact anything to a casual listener. But it's wild. Like, I think one of my favorite things is hearing songs from a demo version to pre-pro, rough mixes, whatever.
Yeah.
Because even just adjusting where something sits in the mix, or whatever, just the songwriting and editing process is so interesting. I forget who it was. I had read something, or I heard it on a podcast or something, and some guy was talking about, from a production standpoint, working with an artist. It was an acoustic song, and the person had it just really bright sounding acoustics, and the production was super bright and shiny. And like an engineer or somebody came through and they're like, you just totally took the soul out of this song. You made it too over polished, and
pretty.
It needs to, and it's like, you need to like let that acoustic breathe. It needs to be more damp. And all these things. And just from a sheer production standpoint, changed how the song was going to come across to a listener.
Totally.
And it's interesting to think about how even something is like that, before it even hits a listener's ears, those are decisions that can drastically change how a song sonically even gets interpreted.
Absolutely. I mean, there's songs that didn't make this batch because of that exact reason. I just couldn't fit. Like, I knew the song was there, and when I heard it, it didn't sound like me. And it wasn't like the production was terrible. It was just like, sometimes you can't quite find that balance, and then you put it to rest and maybe come back to it, or maybe it was just never meant to be. But there's definitely, in my own songs, times where the production makes or breaks, how I feel about the song. And as a listener, I feel like as a musician, it's difficult to listen to music the way I used to listen to music. I listen to it completely different now, where I'm listening to every little thing as if I was mixing it or as if I had written it. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to just, every now and then, you get a song that you just listen to as a fan, you know what I mean? But I think a lot of the times, and live shows as well, it's like all those little things, once you know they're there, it's hard to not know they're there. So you're watching it differently, you're listening differently. It's, it's interesting.
I've talked about how the best and the worst thing I've ever done as someone who's really into music, and I mean, like even the movie Almost Famous, I kind of connected to, like, somehow I knew that was like what I wanted. I just didn't understand in what capacity. Like, I did the band thing, it didn't really work for me. I put on shows, I booked shows, which completely ruined shows forevermore for me.
Too close.
Too close. Now I can't not look and think about guarantees and money and merch cuts and all that stuff. And then even, writing about shows where it's like, you want to make someone who was there feel like they were there, but also someone who wasn't, you want to make them feel like, oh, I have to go to that next time. So there's a weird thing you're doing in between, in addition to being true to yourself.
Right.
But then even now doing this, it's like, it's constant pivot points where it's like, all I've done is just ruin the music industry. And this thing I love so much, I've made it a thing that I kind of hated for a while.
Right.
But something I would actually like to know, if you've had this struggle too, where I kind of had to find my why again. Why I love doing literally the thing we're doing right now. Because I got burned out because I felt like I had to listen to music in such an abstract way that it's like, okay, you put out this EP. What is something that I can find that no one has brought up to you? Right. And that's so hard, and that's not a good way to listen and enjoy music.
No, it takes the joy out, right?
So I would imagine the same thing has to have happened to you at some point, of if you're listening to music, looking at a production standpoint or something that maybe you can take and put in your own arsenal, did it ruin the joy of creating music, or did you have to refine your why?
I don't think it ruined it in the sense of writing and creating music, because it inspires me when I hear, the song that we wrote in the room on acoustic, and then we work it up together. That's usually how I work, is I'll work with the producer and we write every little bit, every drum bit, every guitar, everything. And so to hear that start somewhere and end in a completely different space in the end of the day, getting a pretty worked up demo, it's really inspiring to me. And that is my why, of just like listening to what's possible. Now, as a listener, I definitely have to remind myself to not overthink and to not overlisten and to just be a fan again. And I guess that's my why, is to be the fan that I was when I, went to my first concert and I got inspired to be a musician, like going back to that kid. And being like, what would they want to hear? What would they do? Or, you know what I mean? Like kind of finding that. That, I guess, is the why of the person I was when I started this journey. And every now and then you lose that person, often, I would say, But if you can get back there, there's these little moments on the road or in the studio or something where you feel that feeling and you're like, oh, this is why.
Right.
You know, but it's found in every little moment. It's just, yeah, it's always different.
I feel like at times you have to be mindful of that. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's hard in and of itself, because something I constantly think about too, I mean, even in doing this show, I feel like you're always kind of looking ahead and putting in the work ahead. You're always thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, that I think we oftentimes don't stop to appreciate where we are. And or when you do, not being so down on yourself and being like, well, I was hoping I'd be where, insert whatever the goal is or whatever intangible that you want to put on it.
Totally.
And I feel like the hard thing is it's hard for us to sometimes, I feel like, be proud of ourselves for the journey we've come on and where it's taken us. And when you stop to do that, you're just like, oh fuck, we're like, go me. Like like especially when it's kind of like when you think about all the hard work you've put in and the sacrifices and everything, and it's a thing where when you can step back and look and see what you've done, you're like, I can't fucking believe I did that. Like,
right.
Like, you know, I was watching a video, I think of you in France, I think, or maybe somewhere over there, and I was like thinking to myself, I was like, I bet you might have, like, the first time going over, you're like, I can't fucking believe, like, a song, me making music brought me here.
Yeah.
Like those moments where you just get to kind of sit back and be like, yeah,
it's hard to find those sometimes. I mean, I'm notoriously bad for not being, like, I can be so present in so many aspects of my life. And with my career, I find it very difficult because I am constantly trying to get to the next thing. I'm constantly looking at, where am I going now? Okay, we did this, but now what? I need to keep going. I feel like if I stop, I'm dead. Right. You know, and I probably way too much, because even in France, I don't even think I could comprehend what was going on. I was too caught up in the tour that we just did, where we were going next, you know, a little burnt out from the road. Like, I was not in the headspace to really, I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. And there were so many moments where it was like the one day, I think one of the days we came out of the Airbnb and there was actual friggin' paparazzi, and I've never had that in my life. Like, I was like, I'm not at that level yet. And the guys, like my bandmates, were the first ones to come out, and we all thought it was for someone else. Like, we were just like, we were looking around being like, who's, like, oh, it's us. And that was one moment where I was like, damn, we're in a different country, and like, that's pretty cool. But I find a lot, you know, even with this tour, I'm having the time of my life. You know, the venues are great. The band is amazing to work with. Marcus King, his whole crew, everyone's amazing. And I find myself just focusing on like, okay, but how can I sound better for the next one? What are we going to do for the show for the next one? And I'm just like, you know, not always in the moment. So it's very important to slow down. And I had this today at Soundcheck. I was just looking at, there's like these beautiful stained glass windows on either side of the venue. And I remember, because we played this venue, I think 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I remember looking at that, and that moment for me was like, oh, I've been here, and this is really cool that, you know, I haven't been to the States for like 3 years, but I get to play this venue again. Like, just little wins like that I'm like, just taking a moment to remember that this is awesome and I love what I do. And now we can get back to, how does it sound?
Well, I feel like it's kind of got to be a little bit of a trip professionally, because I feel like, it's hard not to, where I feel like, because I think my time, the pandemic has just completely fried my concept of like when anything was.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I forget that we all collectively have 2 years that didn't exist, essentially. But I want to say it was like 4, maybe 5 that you were playing at the Stash, like really down the road, in like a 400 cap room. And so I feel like it's got to be a little bit of a trip to see things like that, where you can kind of literally see the growth in venues and stuff like that, and the things that you're playing, and kind of being like, I remember playing that room, and I remember feeling like, you know, I talk about a lot of firsts for people, because I think in some capacities, some people, you know, when you everyone had to go away from the thing that they were doing. You know, your career essentially was kind of put on hold. So it almost kind of gives you a point to have firsts again and remember those firsts and remember those moments. And I feel like it's got to be kind of interesting to just kind of live in that. But like, not maybe dwelling on it too much. Like, again, it's kind of this balance of being satiated and happy with the moment you're in and what you've created for yourself, but also taking time to realize, like, and this profession in this industry is one that it's like you can't do that too long, because it's like I know tours that are not even announced that are happening at the end of the year.
Right.
I know some tour friends that are touring and some of their stuff for next year.
Right, yeah.
And it's like that's how fast this industry moves, where it's like, yeah, my next 2 years is already filled.
Yeah.
You won't know about it for 6 to 8 months.
Right.
And so it's like, like you said, you constantly got to straddle the line of how and when do I exist, and when do I take in the moments and the victories and not be satiated with just like, it's good enough.
I know. That's the thing, because it is a quick moving industry, and if you are not, on the ball, then you get left behind. That's just the name of the game. It's like, yeah, it's difficult to get that part out of your brain, but we all do it, and again, you have to remember the why, I guess, in those moments, right?
Absolutely. Something totally random I want to kind of bring up in the last 10 minutes. I think we started a little bit late. Or do I still have you for like 10, or do you need to wrap up like now? It's 6:30.
Probably like 5. We
Sure.
still have to have dinner and then
Cool.
we go
Nope,
on
you're
it.
good.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm not impeding on all your day-to-day
I still have to
stuff.
do my makeup and eat dinner and do the...
Yeah, no, you're good. So I kind of had mentioned before we started rolling that I had watched the video of you making the cocktails.
Yes.
And something that I find interesting, I love cocktails, so watching people make cocktails and determining, how they're picking whatever.
Right.
But it's the idea of pairing it with a song.
Mm-hmm.
Because I famously, Amigo the Devil and I, like Danny and I had a conversation. I found out he worked at a brewery, used to be like a chef and all this stuff. And I was like, learning how to use and incorporate all these different things and flavors and all this stuff, I think is interesting, because it's basically songwriting.
Yeah.
So to me, how did you approach pairing a drink with the song you were going to cover? What was that process like for you?
It's kind of different every time, but sometimes it's like, pretty obvious. I did an old fashioned. I was like, whiskey. It reminds me of Chris Stapleton.
Sure.
His voice sounds like it's bathing in whiskey and cigarettes in the best way.
I feel like it'd be a rye whiskey if I had to pick.
Right?
Yeah.
So that one was a very obvious choice. It's kind of a feeling. It's like, what does it remind me of? Or, is there a memory of me having this drink and thinking about this song? And it's different every time. But yeah, it's kind of like, what does the drink feel like, if that makes any sense? What does the drink sound like?
Yeah. So I was wondering if you got that kind of deep with it. So the other side of my questions was going to be, what does Best of You as a album?
Ooh.
What is the flavor profile of that? What is the drink that you associate with that? And then I'll even take it one step further.
Okay.
What do you think in a drink personifies you?
Ooh, okay. All right. So Best of Me, if we're going song for song, or the
I think the
EP
overall
as a
vibe.
whole?
I think as a whole.
Okay. I would say it's a flight of craft beer.
Okay. So from like light to dark?
Well, here's the thing. So there's got to be an IPA, citrus hoppy IPA, mosaic, because it is bitter. Some of the themes are bitter. No, but there's a variety in this EP of emotions and experiences that I was going through. And for me, yeah, there's got to be an IPA. There's an amber ale. There's a lager, because some of it's pretty light and fluffy. And then there's a porter, a coffee stout, I'd say. I'm trying to think of which one the coffee stout is. Yeah, and then me, okay, what is my drink? Me as a drink. Something spicy. A spicy margarita.
All right, so I'm envisioning at least a tahini rim, maybe some jalapeno infused tequila.
Gotta have the thick salt.
Okay.
Rock salt.
Like the
Tahini
Himalayan
would be
salt?
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tahini, little bit of spice, and then we've got. Ooh, I'm trying to think of the tequila.
See, I almost feel like there would be and maybe it's just because my wife's been drinking the shit out of this lately. Adam Levine's rosé tequila.
Not a huge fan of rosé.
I'm not either, but I like some of the
yeah.
cocktails at the bar across the street, down the way makes like with it. It's kind of that thing. It's got like the black like Himalayan salt on it, a little bit of like jalapeno syrup or something like that. So it kind of takes away like the sweetness of the rosé tequila,
right?
And kind of makes that kind of the part where it cuts through your smoky, salty flavor, and so it kind of almost disguises what your base liquor is. And I always thought that was kind of interesting because to me it's like same. I'm like by itself, I'm like I don't fucking want that.
Yeah,
but in this cocktail, I'm like, that's actually a really interesting way to play all the flavors off of each other and balance everything out, which I think is kind of hard at times.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, there would be some spice, like a spicy pineapple margarita. Little sweet, little spicy.
Frozen on the rocks.
On the rocks only. Okay. Only. Yeah, come on.
Okay.
No judgment, but I'm judging. No.
Yeah, that's whatever people are like, I want a frozen margarita. I'm like, no.
I mean, like maybe a pina colada. Sure. I would do that frozen. Strawberry daiquiri if I'm on a beach.
I was going to say, you just named 2 drinks that I'm like, shit, do people still drink that anymore?
Only if I'm at like a resort or like, by a pool and I want to feel like I'm on vacation.
Is that a hard thing for you to do to decompress and unwind from the road and everything else?
I've gotten pretty good at learning to shut down after tour and like take the space I need to just be alone for a second. That used to be difficult because you're surrounded by chaos and people and you're constantly overstimulated.
And regimented.
Yeah, but then once you come back, the come down can be really tough because you are used to having all this like fun stuff going on and people to talk to and you're always meeting new people and being in new places and blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden it's quiet and that can be really difficult. But I've kind of learned to just accept that my body needs rest, my mind needs rest, my heart needs rest, and it's okay to just be for a couple days. And I'm not going to be lonely. I'm not going to be this. I'm just going to enjoy the alone time and then get back into the world. And then you feel, a lot more rested and like ready to be a human again.
Absolutely. Last question for you. Where can people find you or anything you would like to plug online?
I mean, obviously the EP, which is on everything, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of that stuff. And I mean, we're playing a bunch of festivals this summer. If you're in Canada, come check out a fun show. And then there is something happening in the fall, but I can't say yet. But it's exciting and it's music.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day of playing catch up all day on the road and doing this chat with me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So that was my conversation with JJ. I want to thank her again for, honestly, as weird as this is to say, I really want to thank her for not only the time, but also allowing me to share the space of their green room. I always feel kind of... I always feel kind of a little awkward doing some of these in green rooms because essentially it's sort of the one haven anyone on the tour has, like your green room. Like, okay, I can go here, I can put my shit down. Like, it's your safe space, essentially. It's the place away from everybody else where you kind of get to unwind and to essentially be in that space to do these things or on tour buses or vans or whatever, it is. I always am appreciative of the people because it's not just the person I'm talking to that's kind of sacrificing that time, but it's also the people who then don't have access to that room while that's happening, or if they are, that they have to essentially be very quiet and not be doing maybe what they would normally do if someone else wasn't in the room recording everything. So always appreciative of the artists and the crew and everybody else that makes these possible when we do the in-persons. I also really enjoyed doing the in-person. I don't do many of them anymore. Almost everything now is over, an internet connection and through like a Skype or a Zoom or whatever. So to do some of these in-persons, it's really cool. I kind of forgot how like the immediacy and the intimacy of literally sitting across from someone, being able to look them in the eye, in the room, and kind of picking up on, body language and all those kind of nonverbals that sort of happen when you're doing these. But it was a lot of fun. Like I said, haven't done one in a while like that. Always kind of makes me a little nervous, like maybe I'm not on my game. But honestly, and I don't mean to say this in any discouraging way at all, but with her getting ready partially right before we started recording, it honestly sort of felt like I was just sitting in my house with my wife while she's getting ready before we go out. I know that's probably not how most people would react to that, but watching her, do her hair and put her makeup on and all that kind of stuff as we're getting ready to do the chat and just kind of bullshitting for a little bit beforehand, I was like, oh, it just feels like I'm at home with my wife while, chatting with her before we go out for a night at the bar or something. So it was super cool to kind of, like I said, get to do one of these in person. It hasn't been done in a while for me. So always cool to kind of re-tap into that and kind of get more of a personal connection with the guest I'm talking to. Also, if you would like to see JJ Wilde, she is performing. She has a new tour, a headlining tour. It'll be starting up in October. It starts out here in Michigan in Ferndale. It'll wrap up a couple days after my wife's 40th, November 22nd in Toronto. So if you are interested, based on this conversation, after checking out her music, which I strongly suggest you do, I would go check out the show. It's a good time. Honestly, the crowd for the show was really chill. Sometimes I never know, like when I go to some of these shows that are kind of a blending of genres, I don't always know what I'm going to get. Like if it's just going to be people who are like, we really enjoy this band and we're just going to sit here and not really, interact with the people. Like sometimes that's kind of becoming a thing I've noticed at other shows. Like when I went and saw City and Color this last time, it was a lot of people in little pockets of friends, but it was I think it was basically a sold out show, but like everyone kind of stayed in their own little area and just kind of were having their own moment with everything, which was also really cool to see. It's kind of cool to kind of take in what everyone else is doing, how they're taking in shows, their experience. But I think, and this is where, I'm going to be the cliche guy now, like coming from more hard rock, metal, hardcore, it's about being like kind of on top of one another and experiencing everything sort of as one. And I'm not saying that that's not how those shows are, but like I said, it's just interesting to see how, the different types of shows bring out different types of people and how they take in a show. And I'll say for me at the show, I had a blast. It was fun to just kind of have some beers and just hear some really good songs. And honestly, just seeing everyone having a good time. That's really what it's all about when you go to a show, when you experience a concert in, some of these bigger rooms, like the show was that I saw JJ at, the Marcus King show. It was just kind of nice to be in a big room and see people enjoying the show. And JJ is definitely going to be one. Her and her band will definitely make you enjoy your time watching her, whether you want to or not. And that's also something I love seeing with some of the bands that open some of these tours is obviously in some instances they have to win over the crowd. And I will definitely say that JJ does, and her band, do a great job of winning you over. And then obviously to see her come out later with Marcus and do some stuff was really cool as well. Don't know what to expect through this headlining tour. I mean, you could be in for quite a bit of even some covers maybe or something. I think that's always kind of the fun thing too about seeing some of these bands and artists who maybe are newer and are trying to just have fun. So you'll see them bust out a cover randomly or a really deep cut or whatever. I mean, famously, I think I've told the story on here a couple of times when I went to go see the band Him in Detroit on one of their first tours. They kind of did an underplay of sorts. And it was just full of all these massive diehard fans. And at one point, I remember Villa just kind of being like, if there's a song you want to hear, just kind of start shouting out some songs. And if we can play it, we'll play it. And it sort of kind of became this like intimate, like by request show sort of. And to me, I think that's kind of one of the things when you find an artist who's kind of up and coming and new and kind of grow and evolve with them, you kind of just get to have a lot of fun with the artist figuring it all out. I mean, that's honestly kind of what it is in the grand scheme of things. And to me, that's a lot of fun. So my foot should be healed by then, obviously. So I should be able to go see this show. Maybe I'll do a part 2 with her if her and her team would be into that. And honestly, I would assume maybe the part 2, Best of Me part 2 would be out. Obviously, as you heard us discussing, there's kind of a lot of things that are afoot as far as the rollout and how things are going to be with this and being very obviously with an intention, I should say, of obviously naming something a part 1 that a part 2 is going to come. And unfortunately, we just have to wait. We have to be patient in these trying times of artists having an idea for a part 1 or a part 2 or a compendium and we as fans just have to wait until the timing is right for everything to be revealed. But all of that said, let's start wrapping up the episode. If you would like to keep up with JJ Wilde, you know what? Honestly, this might be one of my favorite handles across social media, and the fact that it is on all social media is also really easy because it's really easy to find someone when it's the same name everywhere. But it is JJ Wilde Child on everything: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You'll find her there very easily. There's two different types of links I found for her website. You can just go to jjwilde.com, or on all of her socials, she has essentially what looks like a link tree of sorts, but it's jjwilde.komi, Komi.io. I have a link for it in the show notes. So however you want to follow her, please do. Like I said, you see a lot of behind the scenes stuff of her playing on the road, doing different things, writing songs, different versions of songs, behind the scenes of video shoots and stuff like that. And who knows, maybe the cocktail and a cover will make its comeback as well. That's something I feel like we need to do next time, is definitely have a couple of drinks or a cocktail or something. So all of that said, if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, simple enough, BrewSpeakPod on all your major social media platforms, and email me, brewtallyspeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that is important. I've been seeing quite the influx of subscribers lately on the YouTube channel. We are so close to hitting 1,000. I think we are literally 30 away. So if you would like to, quote unquote, smash that subscribe and like button, or whatever the hell people say, to get people to do that, feel free to do that. Basically, you can watch all of these. Sometimes I post the videos of me going to shows and taking videos of bands doing different things. I try not to make it something that you're used to seeing. Like a couple years ago when I was at Sonic Temple, getting to record Mark Morton and Jacoby Shaddix doing a song off of Mark's solo record, but done acoustically. That was really cool. I think I might even have the video of Mark with Mark Lanigan doing a song, which actually, now that I think about it, if I didn't post it, I'm really bummed I didn't, because with Mark passing since, it'd be really cool to have that video of Mark Lanigan performing with Mark Morton, but just kind of getting to do some of these, and seeing some of these different things, different covers and so forth that people have done over the years too. So I try to post a lot of different stuff over there. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in checking out, as well as video versions of this podcast, please do such. And I want to shout out rockabilia.com for their continued support over the years of supporting the podcast. Head on over to rockabilia.com, use our code BRUTALLY at checkout, and you can take 10% off your total purchase order. I hope some of you were good and got in when the getting was good last week with the 20% off sale that they were doing for the 4th of July weekend. If you didn't, oh well, I'm here to help you out either way. It may not be 20%, but it's still something. And I want to always thank them for supporting the show over here. And last but not least, I will see you all next week, where I have Tim Montana coming on. There's kind of been a little bit of a theme. I don't know if anyone's noticed it. I'm going to spill the beans because I kind of said I was going to tell you last week and I didn't. But so the theme so far in the last 2 weeks, the last 2 episodes, we had Mercedes from Kitty. She's Canadian. We had JJ, who's Canadian and female as well. So there was sort of the tie-in there. And then this one between JJ and next week's with Tim Montana is the fact that they're both kind of the blending of genres, as it were. They're not quite country. They're kind of rock and roll. They're kind of a little bit of everything. And they're just great people. And I had a blast talking to both of them. So I'm looking forward to getting that episode out to you next week with Tim. Come back, check it out. Have a great week. And I'll see you all then.